Good evening and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Here's a look at what's coming up. Both candidates hitting the airwaves as they sprint to appeal to voters by Election Day. Former President Trump's message to female and Latino voters and highlights from Vice President Harris's interview on Fox News. Israel allowing 50 aid trucks into Gaza today as the U.S. is building up pressure, saying Israel cannot withhold any supplies from Gaza, the latest on the Middle East. And how is Trump navigating the issue of abortion as he appeals to women? And how significant is Harris's losing ground with black men? We'll hear from Democratic strategist Brad Bannon and Republican strategist Will Pierce.
This is Capitol Report, live from our global headquarters in our nation's capital. Here's Steve Lance.
And we begin with the latest development in former President Trump's Georgia election case. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis is now asking to reinstate charges against the former president and his co-defendants. This comes months after the litigation was tossed by Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee. Willis filed a brief today asking the appeals court to overturn the judge's decision. That includes restoring a total of 6 counts against Trump and his co-defendants. Earlier in March, McAfee rejected the charges, saying prosecutors did not provide enough details on the case. So far, former President Trump has pleaded not guilty to all counts. And in former President Trump's federal election case, special counsel Jack Smith pushing to keep the obstruction charge against the former president. Today, Smith told a federal judge that a Supreme Court
are critical to the safety and security.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Today, Smith told a federal judge that a Supreme Court ruling should not apply to Trump. The ruling narrowed how the Justice Department could use a felony obstruction charge to prosecute January 6th rioters. As a result, obstruction charges against a handful of the defendants were dropped. Former President Trump's legal team saying the same should apply to him and asked to have all charges dismissed. But Smith argues Trump's obstruction charge should stand because of his push to have alternative electoral college votes certified. Smith said that links Trump's actions on January 6th directly to his efforts to obstruct the certification proceeding. And former President Trump pitching to female and Latino voters in 2 different town halls today. Comes as Vice President Kamala Harris sits down for a formal interview with Fox News. Joining us now live in studio is NTD's Iris Tao. Good evening to you, Iris. So tell us, what are the 2 candidates saying to voters?
So both of them are actually hitting the airwaves today, with former President Trump participating in a town hall with Fox News aired today with a female audience. And he was trying to make a pitch to women voters by, for example, vowing to bring down household energy prices and also to ban trans women in female sports. And specifically, he also vowed his support for IVF, or in vitro fertilization, at one point saying that he's the father of IVF. But that comment quickly drew criticism from Vice President Kamala Harris, who called that comment bizarre. Here's a clip of that exchange. Watch.
I'm the father of IVF. We're totally in favor of IVF.
I found it to be quite bizarre. Actually, he called himself the father of IVF. And if what he meant is taking responsibility, well, then yeah, he should take responsibility for the fact that 1 in 3 women in America lives in a Trump abortion ban state.
And tonight, Trump is also having another town hall to be aired on Univision. He just taped that earlier today, and that's, of course, targeting specifically Latino voters. The Harris campaign today also released a new ad targeting Latino voters, citing her experience from a working-class family. And today, and more importantly, Harris taped an interview with Fox News' Brad Bannon, in which she was challenged on her record on the border. She was asked about his border policies, but she blamed what she called a broken immigration system for what's going on right now. Watch.
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system
that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came in.
And Harris was also asked about her previous comment that nothing comes to mind when she was asked about what differs her policies from Biden's. And here's how she answered it today. Watch.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency.
And Trump's campaign has already released a response to Harris's interview today, saying it's a train wreck. Specifically, they said that she abdicated any responsibility for the problems Americans are facing. And of course, we know that both of them will continue to talk to media as we're just 20 days now from the election.
And as you mentioned, Iris, we are just 20 days. It's really hard to believe. You've been following both campaigns closely, specifically following former President Trump's campaign. What can we expect over these next 20 days? Can it get any busier?
Of course, so Trump is already ramping up his campaign schedule over the past week or so. He's been campaigning almost 7 days per week, sometimes multiple events on a single day. And today, for example, we know that he taped a town hall. He was campaigning, and later tonight he will be in New York for a fundraiser. And tomorrow he's also going to be in New York. This Friday he's heading to Detroit for another rally. So nonstop, even including over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And interestingly, though, this week Elon Musk announced that he's going to be stumping for Trump, specifically in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania. And that billionaire, he said that no attendance fee will be required, but whoever wants to go needs to be first having signed a petition supporting the right to bear arms and free speech, but also you have to have voted in this election to go to his events. So that's his way of motivating voters in that key battleground state to start that early voting process, and of course to vote for Trump as he's advocating for.
And let's not forget that what seems to be a monumental rally that'll be held at Madison Square Garden in just a couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, all eyes are on that in just a week or so.
And today's Iris Tao, thank you so much. And just hours ago, Vice President Kamala Harris was joined by over 100 Republicans at a rally in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And today's correspondent Jason Blair brings us the highlights from that event.
In battleground Pennsylvania, Vice President Kamala Harris is making her case to win more Republican and independent voters on board with her campaign to the White House.
I've mentioned, many of you know, I spent a career as a prosecutor in law enforcement, and I will tell you, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican? Or are you a Democrat?
Over 100 Republicans joined her in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, a swing county that Biden won by 17,000 votes in 2020. One of the Republicans joining her is former Illinois Representative Adam Kinzinger.
Democracy knows no party. Democracy is a living, breathing ideal that defines us as a nation.
Vice President Harris said on stage that the Constitution is on the line in this election.
We are here today because we share a core belief that we must put country before party.
Early voting started Tuesday in the county located northeast of Philadelphia. In another swing state, the Michigan Firefighters Union did say they will not endorse a presidential candidate, which is in line with its federal organization, who did the same. This comes as a blow to Harris, as the campaign was hoping to secure the endorsement. And back to Pennsylvania, poll averages are showing that the state is virtually tied, with Trump up by only 0.3%. So we can probably expect to see a lot more campaign action from both candidates in the Keystone State. Reporting in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Jason Blair, NTD News.
And Israel attacking a government building in southern Lebanon today, killing local officials. And in the Gaza Strip, Israel allowing 50 more aid trucks to enter. That's after pressure from the U.S. to improve humanitarian conditions there. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has a Middle East update.
Israel launched an airstrike on the municipal headquarters of a major town in South Lebanon. Lebanese authorities say the attack killed the mayor and at least 5 others. Israel's military says it hit dozens of Hezbollah targets in the area and dismantled underground infrastructure. Israel had also issued an evacuation order for the town before the strikes. The White House on Wednesday said it spoke with Israel about its operation in Lebanon.
We have been really clear. It is critical. It is critical that these operations be conducted in a way that does not threaten the lives of civilians.
The Israeli defense minister defends the operations in Lebanon.
Hundreds or even thousands of missiles came from this area across the entire zone. It shows us what situation we have been in.
Also on Wednesday, the Israeli army says a barrage of around 30 rockets crossed from Lebanon into Israel. The majority of them were intercepted by Israeli air defense systems. And video released by Israel appears to show more humanitarian aid headed to northern Gaza on Wednesday. Officials say the shipment includes 50 trucks with medical supplies, shelter equipment, and more. Israel's UN ambassador said this on Wednesday.
The problem in Gaza is not lack of aid. The problem is Hamas, which hijacks the aid, stealing, storing, and selling it to feed their terror machine while civilians suffer.
The shipment comes after the US urged Israel to allow more aid into Gaza. Reports say the US plans to withhold military aid if Israel doesn't comply. On Wednesday, the State Department once again declined confirming those reports.
As I said, this is not a letter that we intended to make public. We intended to discuss public. I understand it is public, and so it's very fair for you to ask questions about it. But when it comes to those implications, we're going to have those conversations privately with the government of Israel.
He added that he hopes Israel complies with the demands so that the U.S. won't have to take any action. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And now turning our attention to the issue of public safety and crime. The FBI unveiling new data suggesting a 4.5% surge in violent crime across the United States in 2022. That includes murders, rapes, robberies, and aggravated assaults. The data was not formally announced by the FBI, but was later discovered by economist John Lott. It was a departure from the agency's previous figures. Last October, the FBI said national violent crime dropped by nearly 2% in 2022 compared to the previous year. That number quickly made headlines and was even cited during the presidential debate between former President Trump and Vice President Harris. And the race for control of the House of Representatives couldn't be tighter. Democrats only need a net gain of 4 seats to take back the gavel. Polls are indicating they have a real chance at securing the 218 that is needed. NTD's Melina Wisecup tells us why.
All 435 seats are up for grabs in the U.S. House of Representatives, and Cook Political Report has rated 207 seats safe for Republicans, while just 202 seats are safe for Democrats, giving them 26 toss-ups to race for. Now, what this means is, at first glance, when you look at it, it looks like Republicans have the upper hand here. They need to defend less seats than Democrats do. Democrats have to win a lot more seats than Republicans. However, if you look at the polling, which is what I did, I took these 26 toss-ups and I looked at each of the polls for each of the candidates to see how those candidates are faring, and here's what I found. So they'd have a majority based on the polling of 221 to Republicans 214, giving Democrats a 4-seat majority. So how would that be possible? Well, Democrats have really honed in on looking at the coastlines, areas that Republicans won in 2022, but by very slim margins. I'll show you what I mean here. So these are the coastline, some just examples of coastline seats. You have California and New York currently held by Republicans, but if you look at the margins of victory that Republicans had back in 2022, they are very, very small margins here. You see less than a percentage point here for Rep. Don Duarte, and then you have, 6% for Representative Steele, 1% for Molinar. The highest one that you have is 6.4 for Garcia. That's still within the single digits, so very small margins of victory for Republicans. What's more is that these are Biden-won districts, so they're popular for Democrats. When you look at how popular Biden is here, 10 points for his presidential race in 2020, 12, these are double digits, very strong popularity. So what Democrats think is since this is a presidential election year, if Democrats in these districts still feel the same about having a Democrat in the White House as they did in 2020, these seats are all well flippable for this election year. Now, what are Republicans trying to do about this? Well, earlier this week, the National Republican Congressional Committee said that they're going to eye the Rust Belt. These are states like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. They, in fact, said that the Rust Belt is a GOP well of flippable seats and ground zero for House Republicans to grow our majority. Not only do they want to grow their majority, but first they need to secure their majority, and that's why they're looking at the Rust Belt seats. So why are they looking at these Rust Belt seats? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Because once again, these are areas that Democrats had a very small margin of victory back in 2022. We see 4%, 2%, 5%, all of them very small margins of victory for Democrats. What's more, some of these are Trump won districts, popular for Trump, and then Biden's margin of victory in 2020 was also quite small. You have less than a percentage points in some of these races and very small 2%, 2.8, 2 points here for Biden. And what Republicans are thinking is that if Trump's popularity in these districts have gone up over the past 4 years, then that down ballot could be very beneficial for Republicans if they get more Republican voter turnout. So what this means is the race for 218 is going to be a tight one. Democrats only need a net gain of 4 seats, meaning they need to keep all the seats they have as well as gain 4 more, and Republicans also have to work for securing their majority. So if the last 4 years has told us anything about the makeup of the House, is that the House of Representatives really like slim margins. Bottom line is this is going to be a tight race for either one of the parties to be able to get to 218. Steve, back to you.
And coming up, President Biden and the First Lady honoring Italian American Heritage Month, hosting over 100 leaders from the community. Jack Bradley reports from the White House. And polls showing Vice President Kamala Harris is slipping in losing her lead. We'll talk to the founder and host of the Young Turks to get his perspective on the reason why. That and more when we return.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
What do you do when your tire goes flat and there's no air anywhere? You reach for Bullseye Pro, the smarter, faster, hands-free way to fill it up with air. Bullseye Pro is equipped with a rechargeable lithium-ion power plant. So fast and so convenient. It's like the power of an air compressor in the palm of your hand. Look, you can inflate all 4 tires on a single charge. It has a built-in smart pressure digital sensor that gauges and automatically stops when the set tire pressure is reached. Easily inflate pool toys, exercise balls, and more. Call or go online now and get the complete Bullseye Pro inflation system for the factory direct price of just $79.99. Plus, we'll ship your entire order free, and we'll give you a 50% discount on a second one. Order now.
To order, call 1-800-984-7221. That's 1-800-984-7221, or go to getbullseyepro.com.
Come to the Mathis Design Studio, the premier destination for designer furniture. See the latest trends from top brands with heirloom quality pieces for every room in your house. Whether you're redecorating a single room or furnishing an entire home, we have the styles you'll love. Plus, enjoy fast, complimentary delivery. Visit us now for exclusive discounts and let us help make your dream home a reality for less than you ever imagined at the Mathis Design Studio.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. So if you want to talk to your kids, you got to get it trending. I was just trying to get your attention.
Could I just ask? Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
And welcome back to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. October is Italian American Heritage Month. President Biden and the First Lady speaking at a reception at the White House to over 100 leaders from the Italian-American community. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us live now from the White House. Good evening, Jack. So how did the president honor Italian-American Heritage Month today?
Good evening, Steve. Well, there was a huge reception with over 100 leaders of Italian-American heritage. Jill Biden went on first, the First Lady, and she talked about how she comes from a long line of Italians. Her grandparents came through Ellis Island from Italy, and she talked about growing up in an Italian neighborhood, eating Italian food and just living in that culture. And President Biden came up, obviously of Irish descent, but saying that Italian-Americans are a backbone of the U.S. Take a look.
You know, my dad used to have an expression. He said, Joey, family is the beginning, the middle, and the end. The beginning, the middle, and the end. It's a faith that is carried through to today, both at home and abroad. Italian Americans are central to our nation's deep friendship and strategic partnership with Italy.
Now, October honors Italians in the U.S. Christopher Columbus, an Italian, was thought to be the first person to discover America. And America was actually named after an Italian explorer and expeditioner, Amerigo Vespucci. And currently, there are about 26 million Americans right now living in the U.S. that are of Italian descent. Steve?
Jack, it wasn't all celebrating today, of course. There was a memorial for Ethel Kennedy, the widow of former Senator Robert F. Kennedy, sister-in-law of former President John F. Kennedy, and of course the mother of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In this time of mourning, what was said of her legacy?
There was a lot said, and there was definitely a lot of mourning there, but there was also a celebration of her life as well. And then when we heard Sting, as well as the artist Sting, as well as we had Stevie Wonder, who performed and replaced her name, Ethel, with in Isn't She Lovely, the song. We had a lot of people singing along, and it was a very lively moment, one of which was very memorable. President Biden, as well as former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi were among the many to give remarks and talk about her enduring legacy as one of a very enduring spirit. Take a look.
I'm not biding my time waiting for you, Valentine. And then in her handwriting she says, because he's no ordinary Joe. I don't know how many got that damn Valentine, but I tell you what, it meant a lot to me.
I think if at any point she had stepped away from public life or allowed bitterness to fester after all she and her family had been through. But that is not what Ethel did, because that's not who she was.
Nobody should be this upbeat, having been through everything she has.
She was a national treasure. We all know that. And a matriarch of a great family.
Ethel Kennedy raised 11 children after her husband was assassinated in 1968 during his president campaign. Now, she supported him throughout his time as senator, and she was also established the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights, and was well known for her work in social causes. President Obama, former President Barack Obama, even gave her the medal, the honor of for her human rights work. The medal was the Medal of Freedom. And one of her sons, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was obviously in attendance but did not speak at the event. We obviously know that he had a presidential campaign running initially as a Democrat, then as an independent, and before dropping out in August and then endorsing former President Trump. And we know that his family has famously shunned him for his political views. So not a huge surprise that we didn't see him speak at this one, but he was in attendance, of course, honoring his mother. Now, as for President Biden, he will be in Germany tomorrow for the next couple days, speaking with German officials, meeting with them to talk about support for Ukraine. The U.S. offers more support for Ukraine than any other country, and then Germany is number 2. And they'll also be talking about combating anti-Semitism. as well. And we also heard word that President Biden will be heading to Africa in the first week of December, Angola specifically. And he'll be the first president since Obama to do so, to visit Africa. It'll be the first time he visits the continent in his entire presidency. Steve.
NTD's Jack Bradley reporting live from the White House. Thank you, Jack. And as Vice President Harris is slipping in the polls, she's just finished up an interview this evening on Fox News. How much influence does the media have on this election? To discuss, we welcome Cenk Uygur, founder and host of the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, thank you so much for joining.
No problem.
Cenk, you said recently that polls show Harris is not doing too well, is somewhat losing her lead. Why do you think she's starting to slip, and do you still feel that way?
Yeah, now remember, it's a super close election. So slipping means down 1 in the swing states as opposed to being up 2 in the swing states. So super close, it could still swing back the other way. In the beginning, she did fantastic. And when she announced Tim Walz and what we consider an economically populist agenda, we said, I think that the country will react really well to that. And on the Young Turks, we were right. And they did. And she went, Joe Biden was at one point losing by 8 to Donald Trump. And then Kamala Harris wound up taking a 5-6 point lead nationally. So that's a gigantic swing. Unfortunately, at that point, she then turned around and started being very pro-business, pro-war, pro-Israel, and all of those things hurt her. And I said on the show, uh-oh, she's going to start losing her lead. And then right after that, yes, she started losing her lead. There are things you can do right and wrong that affect the election.
So what do you think, Cenk, that the polls are not showing us? And with less than 3 weeks until the election, what is the most important thing for Harris to focus on right now?
Yeah, so look, if you'd asked me that question a couple of months ago, I would have had a different answer, because I think they should have built some themes into this campaign. But that ship is partially sailed, largely sailed. And so they were, like I said, they were doing some wonderful things in the beginning. And if I could, I'd convince them to go economically populist. What that means is, hey, not progressive across the board, and we're talking about some of those social issues that divide the country. No, don't do that, right? But when you're talking about economic issues, what are you going to do for the average person in America? Please stop focusing on trying to please business interests. Those are just your donors talking into your ear. Both Trump and Kamala Harris and Biden and all these politicians, they all do the same thing. They get in a room with giant donors that are all billionaires, and they come out of the room and they go, oh, but trust us, we're going to be super pro-business. No, that was for that tiny little room. When you're trying to win the election, you're supposed to do things that are popular with 330 million people, the average American.
Now, Senator J.D. Vance just recently did an interview with Martha Raddatz on ABC this week. I want to play this clip and get your thoughts on the role of media in this election.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened.
Martha.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs.
Cenk, in this response here was, we'll paint a broad brush. Is the media a little bit out of touch here? And what's your reaction to the exchange?
Yeah, that was not a great moment for Martha Raddatz. Look, we want the media to hold Trump, Vance, by the way, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, all of them accountable. And they very rarely do that. And so here she's trying to hold them accountable, except she's got her facts wrong. So if she says that the town of Aurora, Colorado was not taken over, that's definitely correct. And Donald Trump, when he says that, he sounds like an idiot, honestly. Like, you think the entire town of Aurora, Colorado is run by a Venezuelan gang. How can anyone possibly believe that? And of course, the Republican mayor says, no, that's not remotely true. But when she says, hey, these apartment complexes being taken over, she seems to be implying that it's not that big a deal. No, she's totally wrong about that. And J.D. Vance is right. It is a big deal. And it turns out I've now watched dozens of local news stories from Aurora, Colorado, from Denver. And by the way, some other cities that are affected, like San Antonio. Yes, they definitely take over apartment units. And in fact, they've taken over entire apartment complexes. A complex was shut down in Aurora, Colorado. 250 units that they were running was shut down in San Antonio. So should we be concerned about those gangs? Absolutely. And by the way, their number one victims is other immigrants that have come in. They prey on their own immigrant community. So the left wing should not be excusing that. The mainstream media should not be minimizing that. At the same time, of course, Trump shouldn't be blowing it out of proportion and pretending they took over whole towns.
Cenk Uygur, we appreciate you joining us and appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
And coming up, would a Joe Rogan podcast appearance boost the candidates? We speak with Democratic strategist and pollster Brad Bannon and Republican strategist Will Pierce for the latest on the presidential race. And Nebraska will allow people who've completed their felony sentences to vote in this election. How the state Supreme Court's decision might impact the races on November 5th. After the break.
Tangazo hili linahusu njaa. Tarajia kuona watoto wakiwa na njaa katika maeneo haya. Mambo yalikuwa bora kwa miaka mingi. Tuliweza kupigana na njaa na watoto wachache walikufa. Lakini sasa mambo yamebadilika na kwa mabaya zaidi. Hii ni kwa sababu wakati huu ukame umeangamiza zaidi.
Через війни та конфлікти ми мусимо залишати наші домівки і всі наші речі. Ми навіть не маємо їжі. Тому нам потрібна ваша допомога.
Millions of children are fighting to survive due to inequality, conflict, poverty, and the climate crisis. Save the Children is working alongside communities to provide a better life for children. And there's a way you can help. Please call or go online to give just $10 a month, only 33 cents a day. We urgently need 1,000 new monthly donors in the next 30 days to help the children we support around the world. You can help provide food, medicine, care, and protection, plus so much more that a child needs, by calling right now and giving just $10 a month.
Ви можете допомогти голодуючим родинам вижити. और बच्चों को भूख से मरने से रोक सकते हैं.
All we need are 1,000 monthly donors in the next 30 days. Please call or go online now with your monthly gift of just $10. Thanks to generous government grants, every dollar you give can have up to 10 times the impact. And when you call with your credit card, we will send you this Save the Children tote bag as a thank you for your support.
Toto kote duniani
потребують вашої допомоги.
Your small monthly donation of just $10 could be the reason a child in crisis survives. Please call or go online to givetosave.org to help save lives.
For those who cherish tradition and stand for the values that built this great nation, Republican Red Winery proudly embodies the spirit of American greatness. Let's raise a glass to forging our own future, building a bigger, better, and stronger America. The best is yet to come.
And welcome back to the Capitol Report. I'm Steve Lance. For the latest on the presidential race, we speak with Democratic strategist and pollster Brad Bannon, as well as Republican strategist Will Pierce. Will Pierce, Brad Bannon, thank you both so much for joining.
Thank you.
Brad, I'll start with you. On Tuesday, Vice President Harris faced multiple questions from radio host Charlemagne the God and his listeners, really, about her plans for black Americans, particularly black men. Although the majority of the voter group still supports Harris, polls are showing that she's slipping a bit as Trump's numbers rise with that particular demographic. Is it a real vulnerability for Kamala Harris?
Well, I just looked at a battleground state in Georgia, and in Georgia, 70% of the black men who are voters in Georgia are supporting the vice president. So there's been a little slippage, but it's been more than made up for because Harris is doing much better than Joe Biden was among white women.
Will, I want to get your thoughts here. What does this mean for both candidates? And do you see either of them gaining ground with either, say, the white women in, suburban America versus the young black vote?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just like Brad said, the point that Kamala is slipping down to 70% is very telling. When Biden ran last time, he had about like 95% of the black vote. So about like 20 to 30% of the black vote being lost is very substantial. And I think it basically goes back to the fact that the Harris message is not resonating with middle-class Americans.
Now, Brad, popular podcaster Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders back in 2020, but has since shifted in some of his views. Rogan called Harris the worst back in July. He had even harsher words for former President Trump in 2022. Who do you think he'll endorse this year, if anyone?
Well, I'm not sure. He seems to be ambivalent about the race. Rogan is actually a good example of the few voters in the battleground states who are ambivalent because of their dislike of Trump and their concerns about the economy.
Now, Will, I believe both candidates, Harris and Trump, have been invited on the Rogan podcast. Do you think that an appearance by either of them will help give them a boost?
I think appearance would help, but I think actually Joe Rogan just speaks about like the everyday American right now. Myself, I actually worked for Bernie Sanders very closely. I was a senior advisor for him, and I actually was in the room when he interviewed, when Joe Rogan interviewed him the past cycle. And now I'm a Trump supporter. It's just the whole entire country shifted a lot over the past 4 years underneath the Biden administration. You have a lot of people like myself, a lot of Americans who are sitting here and saying, you know what? Instead of focusing on foreign overseas stuff like Ukraine and Israel and everything, we have to focus on American policies right now. And I think that's why Joe Rogan and other like prominent people like Elon Musk are coming out and they're saying, you know what, hey, instead of going backwards like how we've been doing with the Democratic Party, we have to look at America first.
Both candidates barnstorming the media today, with Kamala Harris on Fox with Bret Baier. You have former President Trump earlier today on Fox News with Faulkner Harris at a town hall with women. I want to play, this town hall was in the battleground state of Georgia. I want to play a clip and get your reaction on the issue of abortion that came up.
The question of abortion. Women are entitled to do what they want to and need to do with their bodies, including their unborn. That's on them regardless of the circumstance. Some are necessary to save their own lives. Why is the government involved in women's basic rights?
Right, good. I think it's great, and I'm glad you asked it. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. I strongly believe. You know, you have to follow your heart. Some people don't. It's a very small percentage, but you have to follow your heart. To redo it. It's back in the states where they can have the vote of the people. It's exactly where they want to be.
Will, the issue of abortion has been a delicate balance for former President Trump to navigate. What do you make of his response there and this issue in general, the way it's playing out right now in the election?
I do believe it's a states' rights issue. Right now, when you have abortion, it's a very divisive issue in our country overall. And you do have a lot of states. Let's just take, for example, California versus Texas. Very polarizing opposite opinions when it comes to abortion, for the most part, with the electorate. So the fact that President Trump is taking that into account and he's saying, you know what, let's have it be a states' right instead of just across the board a country issue or a national issue, I agree with him 100%.
Brad, where do you rank this issue right now in terms of for the Democrats. Is this going to be the Republicans' kryptonite, perhaps?
Well, I mean, one thing to remember to put this in context, if you look at the national polls and the battlegrounds polls, about 2 out of every 3 Americans want to go back to the Roe v. Wade standard that Donald Trump's justices on the Supreme Court annulled. And it is going to be a big issue. One of the interesting things is, and I think might tip the balance, is in the 2 southwestern battleground states, Arizona and Nevada, there are both referendums in both states that would allow the 2 states to go back to the Roe standard. And they're both winning by large margins. And I think in Arizona and Nevada, with those with those ballot questions on choice, which are doing very well, that could tip the balance to Harris in the 2 southwestern battleground states. So I think it's a potent issue, especially in the Southwest.
Now, yesterday, Trump also sat down for a rather tough interview, certainly not a friendly one, at the Economic Club of Chicago, where he sat down with the Bloomberg, I believe it was the chief editor there. The issue of tariffs in China came up quite a bit. I want to play a piece of sound from that interview.
The higher the tariff, the more likely it is to have them come into the country.
The higher the tariff, the more you're going to put on the value of that piece, those goods, the higher people are going to pay in shops.
Ready? The higher the tariff, the more likely it is that the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff.
Will, we haven't heard too much about foreign policy from either of the candidates, especially at the debates. Do you think that what Trump's saying here will resonate with the American people?
I think it will resonate with American people overall because while the amount of jobs are increasing in the United States, it's because the average person has to work 2 or 3 jobs. But if we do bring more good, better jobs, more from overseas, that would be what Donald Trump is basically saying. If we sit here, if we take a lot of the jobs that have been outsourced overseas but bring them back over into the United States, that's where we have to go as a country.
Now, Brad, in all fairness, the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has not rescinded or lifted the Trump-era tariffs on China. In fact, they've added more to them. What do you think is the best approach for the Democrats on this issue?
Well, the thing to remember is in the 1920s, the United States and the rest of the industrialized countries in the world had massive tariffs. And it led to the worst depression in American history, and millions of Americans lost their jobs. There is a need for trade, and Trump's excessive tariff restrictions would ruin the American country and move America back into the kind of unemployment that existed during his first presidency. Remember, the Biden policy has created more than 15 million jobs since Trump left office. And if we had Trump's excessive tariffs, we would go back to the bad old days of Trump's tenure when unemployment was rampant.
Will Pierce, Brad Bannon, really appreciate both of you joining us.
Thank you very much.
In Nebraska, people with felony convictions will be able to register to vote. The state Supreme Court's decision today could have implications for this year's general election. Nebraska's Secretary of State sought to keep about 7,000 people with felony records from voting. The court ruling today says that the Secretary of State had no authority to strip voting rights from people convicted of a felony. This could potentially add hundreds of new voters to the rolls. They have until October 25th to register. Nebraska overall is heavily Republican, but the state divides its electoral college votes by congressional district. The second congressional district, centered around Omaha, is a toss-up and has voted both ways in previous elections. The Harris campaign and Democratic groups have spent millions there to secure that precious electoral vote. And coming up, as Election Day draws near, a judge in Georgia blocking a measure that requires all ballots to be counted by hand. We hear from voters about their perspective on that decision. That and more when we return.
Amazing They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Abused youth often feel safer on the street. Now, more than ever, that's the most dangerous place of all. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming, and no young person is ever turned away. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month to help a young person. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Your gift will show them they're loved. Homeless young people are afraid and alone with nowhere else to turn.
You want to know that there's somewhere you can go that's safe. So the Covenant House did that for us.
Please call now with your gift of $19 a month. We'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. Please don't wait. Your gift is the lifeline a young person needs now. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org. Thank you for saving precious lives.
Will radical lies determine your child's future, or will timeless truths? Fathom the Good equips children with wisdom against the world. Our homeschool curriculum teaches high schoolers to think critically. We provide primary texts, original content, reasoning tools, and mentoring videos to help them transform America. Teach your children to navigate the world's woke confusion. Teach them to fathom the good.
There's always a searching process for beauty. You know it when you see it.
And welcome back to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. The battle for microchip dominance between the United States and China is running high. A Beijing-backed organization is targeting products from American chipmaker Intel. The Cybersecurity Association of China saying today that Intel products sold in China should be subject to a security review. Last year, China's cyber watchdog barred domestic operators of key infrastructure from buying products made by U.S. chipmaker Micron, saying the company's products failed China's network security review. The allegations come at a time when the U.S. is restricting China's access to crucial chip-making equipment and components. It's part of Washington's efforts to halt the modernization of China's military. So what does the Justice Department's antitrust case against Google and its potential outcome mean for big tech and also for you and everyday Americans? Joining me now to assess the implications of the case is David Balto, former Assistant Director of Policy and Evaluation for the Federal Trade Commission. David Balto, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Steve.
Of course, David. So let's talk about this landmark antitrust case against Google. We hear about different cases popping up against big tech that could be the thing that finally takes them down. Just how big is this particular case?
This is a very important case. Certain elements of it are very important. It involves a set of practices, though, I think that are somewhat limited. And what's important is the Department of Justice has brought this case and successfully litigated it and secured a very comprehensive decision by a thoughtful judge about how Google's a monopolist and how they've engaged in exclusionary conduct to foreclose competition.
Now, of course, many Americans are concerned about their privacy and some of these big tech companies having so much of that data and also at the same time so much power. Would this case truly have an impact on these concerns, or may there be workarounds for Google?
Well, hopefully, to the extent that there has been that Google's engaged in exclusionary conduct that has prevented search competition from arising, you would see that if through the department's action, you'll see more competition in search and perhaps, hopefully, better alternatives providing greater privacy protections. That's what one hopes for from a case like this.
Now, how could the outcome of this case affect other big tech companies, say like Amazon or Apple, and ultimately how would that impact everyday Americans?
I think, the impact on everyday Americans is probably a better place to start. What we hopefully would see through an enforcement action, this enforcement action, would be changes to the marketplace so other competitors to Google can arise. You'd see a greater variety of services in terms of providing search and a greater set of products that would possibly be offered. Now, in terms of their major competitors, Amazon and Apple, I don't think this will have much of an effect, if any, on those companies.
And if you could just sort of help us unpack some of the charges in terms of what exactly Google is being accused of doing to sort of enhance or insulate its monopoly.
Sure, and unfortunately, somebody's come to our door, so we may need to do this more than once. But basically, what's illegal under the antitrust laws is not being a monopolist. It's engaging in exclusionary conduct to prevent other firms from being able to challenge that monopoly. And there's good reason for that standard. We want firms to aggressively compete, and ultimately, if they succeed, they receive the benefits of being a monopolist, but we don't want them to pull the ladder up away from other people trying to ascend that mountain and trying to compete with them. And in this case, the Department of Justice demonstrated, according to the court's opinion, that Google engaged in a variety of practices that severely limited the opportunities of its rivals to effectively compete. And that's the core of the Justice Department case.
From your perspective, has this been sort of a long time coming, building up to this point, or have you seen anything like these charges that the DOJ has brought before?
Well, Google has been in the antitrust crosshairs for a long time, and there was a previous FTC investigation that ended in about 2013 with very, 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 very modest action by the FTC. The Department of Justice and the Trump administration took a new look at the conduct, in part because of agreements Google had entered into with Apple, which really seemed to significantly foreclose the opportunity of rivals to effectively compete. It's not unusual for monopolists to get a lot of antitrust scrutiny, and so this seemed to be totally appropriate.
David Balto, really appreciate your perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with Election Day only less than 3 weeks away, a judge in Georgia blocking a measure that requires all ballots to be counted by hand. The decision came after a ruling that demands election officials to certify all results by November 12th. This comes at a time when more Americans are concerned over election integrity. NTD's Sam Wong was out in the National Mall to find out what the people had to say.
How do you feel about not finding out the result on Election Day?
I think it's very important for democracy that every vote is counted. And if you're not doing that, then you're suppressing the vote.
There's people voting. We need to know the results as soon as possible.
I don't think it needs to be done on Election Day or even the next day. It might take a few days to get everything counted.
I think the results should be reported immediately after Election Day. It allows too much time for questions. I mean, at the end of the day, if you go ahead and report the results, then everything is said and done. It gives the country opportunity to go ahead and absorb what those results are.
You can transfer billions of dollars in a matter of seconds, and you can't count our votes in a day.
I think it'd be frustrating just in general to not have results at the end of the election day, but I would rather have solid, actual, real results.
As much logistics that we have in this country, it's just ridiculous that you can't complete an election in 24 hours.
There is a little bit of controversy right now in Georgia. So they used to have a law that would require the state to count all the ballots by hand, just so that they can get a more accurate count, right? And then now a judge has rejected that decision. So what do you make of that?
Modern modern technology, you know. I mean, there's enough that's outdated. You might as well get up to speed with it.
If there's ballots that are damaged in the process of counting through the computer, then that will protect the ones that don't get counted.
They shouldn't need to count the ballots by hand. Why should they? They've had 4 years to figure out how to count their ballot.
The only reason you would cancel something is if you have something to hide. The actual ballots cast had to match the registered voters in Georgia. I don't know that there's any real way that you can do that without hand or personal audit.
Generally speaking, the electronic ballots are doing their job.
Point blank would rather have verified counts. If that means that they need to count them by hand, then we should be doing that.
Whatever yields the best and most accurate results is what they need to do. And if it's by hand count, then they need to get enough people to make that happen on Election Day.
And that is all we have for you this evening on the Capitol Report. Thank you for joining. See you back tomorrow.